up, y'all?
Hey, America. Hey, the world.
Welcome to the Motive Zone. Thank you for tuning in.
Yes.
My name is Tiffany, and
My name is Kevin Lassiter.
to kind of kickstart things, I just wanted to recap. As you know, last week was our first episode.
Yes.
Woohoo!
Woo!
Yes. So some of the things that we talked about last week was women's rights, and we talked about the abortion laws, the anti-abortion laws.
Yes.
And
Deep conversation,
it was
guys.
a deep conversation.
It was.
What else did we talk about? We spoke about
We spoke about women's rights. Oh, we spoke about just taking charge of your body.
yes,
Having government
women
out of
having
your body.
agency
Yes.
over their own bodies,
Exactly.
and we spoke about some of the presidential candidates. We introduced
Yes.
them. We said them by name and where they're from,
And their connection to women's rights.
and their connection to women's rights. You know, we got 23 candidates, 23 Democratic candidates right now, and so it's quite the cluster right now. But so yeah, that's what we talked about last week, and we introduced ourselves.
Yes.
I didn't do such a great job of introducing myself.
My sister, I think you did beautifully. I think you did beautifully.
Well, I just wanted to kind of go back. Let me recap. You know, I was a little nervous. It was the first episode, y'all. Bear with me. And just so you know, my name is Tiffany Clark, and I am the founder of Purposeful Motives Coaching. And the reason that I started Purposeful Motives was because, there was a time in my life where I felt like as if I didn't know what my purpose was. I was kind of I'm struggling with that and figuring out what it was that I wanted to do with my life.
Yeah.
And I always knew that I wanted to help other people.
Yeah.
But, while I was going through my whole transition of trying to figure that out, I realized that, there are other people that probably have experienced the same thing, struggling with what their purpose is. And so I just wanted to, I went into life coaching. I got certified as a life coach. And, as I was going through that transition, I began to discover that purpose is not something that's out there.
Right.
Purpose is something that you live and do every single day. Yeah. And, in order to find some sort of self-fulfillment, self-achievement.
Yeah.
And,
as elementary as this is going to sound, in Sister Act 2, I believe it was Sister Act 2, Whoopi Goldberg said, if you wake up in the morning and singing is not the first thing on your mind, then you are not meant to be a singer. So I take that to heart. If you wake up in the morning and the first thing that hits your mind is, I want to inspire others. What can I do to help others? What can I do to push others forward? If you wake up in the morning and in your mind you have this connection to spirituality, how can I improve myself? How can I better myself? You just discovered your passion.
Yeah, basically. You've discovered your purpose, and your purpose is to do that.
Exactly.
But, I also feel like as if purpose is not about something that you have to do. It's something that, something that you aspire for. Like if I had, I felt like my purpose was to be a singer.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't necessarily feel like it's always that. I feel like it's in the way that you conduct yourself on a daily basis, like what you, how you set your intentions for the day.
Yeah.
And so that's basically how I came up with the name Purposeful Motives, because I felt like I wanted to live my everyday life with purpose. So I would set an intention for the day, and that's how I would go about my day. So
I love that.
Yeah. So as some of you know, I have Purposeful Motives on Instagram, and
give it up for the gram.
and what I do is I put out a motive of the day to kind of get people to thinking and offer some motivation.
Yes.
And hopefully, some people take with them something each and every day. Before they kind of embark on the day. It's usually early when I posted it anyway.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of why I got started with Purposeful Motives and life coaching. But also the reason why I wanted to start a podcast, the Motive Zone podcast, is because, like I said, there are people like myself and like Kevin, young millennials or whoever that kind of struggle with different things, have questions about certain things. And I thought that we would be a great voice to those individuals that have questions about life and politics and what's going on in the world and all of that good stuff. So anyway, that's my long spiel.
Aww.
But
I feel like I've known you for years. I know our viewers feel like they just know you and can connect with you.
Yes, so thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you. And so Today's motive, we're going to be talking about, well, the
Breakfast.
motive of the episode
Right.
is to kind of bring awareness to Black voter fatigue and kind of to talk about what that means and talk about what's causing that. And so, what is Black voter fatigue, Kevin?
Oh, in my opinion,
And what, in your opinion?
Black voter fatigue is when you're sitting in the kitchen and CNN turns on and you just feel a wave of exhaustion hitting you. A wave of exhaustion where you just have to tune out and tune into something else. Voter fatigue is when you're hit every day with a new story about a candidate, a new policy. Voter fatigue is where you just don't feel like researching anymore, reading anymore, finding out the facts for yourself. Voter fatigue, especially in my community and Catonsville, is when it's actually time to vote. You don't know who the candidates are.
You don't care.
You don't care. You just go for it.
Yeah.
You're tired of looking at every time it's on your feed on Facebook, every time it's on your feed
Switch
on
off.
Instagram, you switch off or you keep scrolling. It's just, and it gets, for some people, it gets mentally overbearing.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Just thinking about information hitting about President Trump or
Yeah.
when the Mueller investigation was hot. And,
Oh my gosh.
And now Pelosi is now hot, and you're tired. You don't
Tired.
know.
Tired.
You don't know what's going on. You don't care about what's going on. You're tuning out.
Yeah, you totally disengaged. And so, like, I know for myself, for the longest of time, I wouldn't even watch the news because I
Yeah.
was so sick
Yeah.
of seeing 45 on the television. There's always something about 45. It's always something about these candidates.
And
We
it
don't-
can be disparaging at times.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
disparaging because you feel like as if these policies are not really benefiting me and my
Right.
community. They're
Right.
not benefiting the Black community.
Right.
And so I know, like, when it came time for the 2016 elections, I know we had a lot of I know people in my own family, friends, my circle of friends that were like, I'm not voting for what? You know, and I get it.
Yeah.
You know, but, right now we are back in the midst of it.
Yeah.
It's election season.
So it's hitting the news.
And so it's hitting the news, and
And let me tell you, I don't mean to interrupt.
no, go ahead.
But so you know what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I won't discuss that. But at work, it's becoming very apparent that international policy
Mm-hmm.
is swinging on especially with the U.S.-Iranian conflict, is swinging on who's taking office in 2020. The Iranians especially are paying close attention
Oh, really?
to who's taking office in 2020.
Why is that?
Well, so and this again, you can get any policy analyst. I am not that old to be all the professors in the world of academia. You can comment. You know our page. You can check me on my facts. But in my opinion, with the Obama administration, they strike the nuclear deal in which the deal was with the Iranians. If you grant us, we'll give you the nuclear weapons if you grant us a percentage of the money that was frozen from our government in the 1970s by the West. You can have the nuclear weaponry. What wasn't being paid attention to is that they used that money to buy up all the materials that they needed. And of course, this is unclassified. You can Google this. Buy up all the materials that they needed for the weapons, and then they used the rest of the money to strategically plant men men in uniform in the countries around them: Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, playing well with U.S. Middle Eastern geopolitics. With this administration, as much as I'm a little pushed back by President Trump, with this administration, he wasn't having it. He went in and pushed sanctions against the Iranian government. He made the regime a terrorist, terrorist watch. Placed the regime under terrorist watch, and he made sure that our allies knew if you financially support this regime, you're under that watch as well. So with this administration, what he brilliantly did was he's starving the government by starving the people. And as wrong as that sounds, that is they were not expecting that. That was a stomp on nuclear progression in Iran. And so they're really looking to who's going to take office in 2020 because they feel like they can play the geopolitics game that they did during the Obama years if the opposition to our administration takes the White House. So they're paying close attention for all the international IR nerds out there. um, so this election is not just important domestically, it's important
Oh,
in the
yeah.
game that we play in international relations.
Yeah. So, thank you for that, that brilliant synopsis of what's going on in the world and
Yes,
the
you're
international
welcome.
relations. I
You're welcome.
appreciate that.
I'm not sure if I'm saying I'm not gonna push people to vote for Trump. I'm just saying pay close attention.
No, you're not going to do that. But back to Black voter fatigue.
Yes. A total pendulum shift.
That's
shift,
okay.
as we
That's
say.
all right. Sometimes it happens, right?
Yes.
So yeah. So I think that right now, because people are so well, like I said, in 2016 we were pretty apathetic. You know what I'm saying? A lot of people were like, okay, well, no, I'm not
voting between the
But
liar
because
and the,
like you were saying,
Yeah.
even with international, country, everybody, around the world, people are looking to see who's going to be president.
yeah, they are.
And
They're very
people,
invested.
People are very invested in 45. So
And think about it like this. As dramatic as this is going to sound, I love how Dr. Wallet Ferris, if you guys don't know him, he's a great political analyst as well, historian, projectionist in the IC community. But what I love how he describes the United States, he describes it as Rome. So all the citizens of Rome don't care about what's going on in the outskirts of the world because we hold our power from within. But when you're dependent on that particular power on the outskirts of the world, you care about who's taking the throne. So the world is always watching, and it behooves us to watch too, since we're affected both domestically and our power is affected internationally.
yeah, so I think that one of the reasons why we are, so one of the reasons that we are apathetic, as I was saying, is that because we feel like some of these policies are not being brought to, some of these conversations have been had, and they usually had around election season. So like one of the hot topics in Washington right now is reparations.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And I feel like for myself, like we've been talking about this for so long.
Yeah.
Reparations, but what does that mean for us? Why do we want reparations? What does that mean? Where does this even come from? Do people even know what reparations mean? What it looks like? What it's gonna, how it affects, the Black community and all of that stuff. So I see you got your notes over here.
I do got my notes. Let me put my old man glasses on.
I see you got your notes over here.
I do.
So let the people know what reparations mean.
Okay, so for those who are not sure what reparations are, according to Merriam-Webster, reparations are repairing or keeping in repair, the act of making amends, offering expiation, or giving satisfaction of a wrongdoing, the payment of damages. And in the international community and in policy, what reparations are a compensation or money given to a destroyed country, a defeated nation, for damages that were procured while conquered or taken over by a hostile nation. So compensation in money or materials payable by a defeated nation for damages to or expenditures sustained by another nation as a result of hostilities with that defeated nation.
So in layman's terms, so in layman's terms, that means basically, the U.S. government did us filthy, did Black people filthy, with slavery, and they owe us some money.
Think about the era of Reconstruction in the 19th century in U.S. history, when the South was defeated, when they were brought back into the Union. Reparations at that time would have been a rebuilding of the South. It didn't happen. A rebuilding of the South, matching of jobs, and bringing back a strong economy. That you don't see a strong economy in the South until the 1960s, but that's basically reparations.
Right.
And that was when the nation was split. Yeah. So reparations for Black people would be giving back or making amends for the act of slavery, that has a legacy that has destroyed us for the past 400 years since the first slaves were in Virginia.
And so some people believe that reparations is just about financial compensation.
No.
And like as you said, it's about economic inequity. It's, I feel like personally, and some of these presidential candidates that are, the Democratic candidates, they've been talking about ways to give back to the black communities affected by, affected by slavery. So I got quiet because it was a little bit of noise. I don't know if y'all can hear that or not, but
hopefully they can.
Yeah, hopefully they can. But so the Democratic candidates have been talking about finding ways to come up with financial compensation.
Yes.
And personally, I feel like there is no amount of money that can undo the damage done from 400 years of slavery.
Slavery ended only 150 years ago.
Yeah, and everything else.
Yeah.
Post-slavery.
Yes.
We're still
from Jim Crow.
Yeah, and so which candidates? I know that Cory Booker was.
Marianne Williamson.
Marianne Williamson, she stated that she wanted to set aside $200 to $500 billion to put back into the black communities.
Yes.
And in the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot of money.
No.
Not to me. I mean...
No, I mean, when you think about what's happening...
you think about it. You have one person... What was his name? The Amazon guy? Is it the Amazon guy?
Yes.
He's worth $180 billion?
He is worth... Just one person.
Just one person is worth $180 billion.
And for those of us who can imagine that amount of money, that may seem like enough, but in the grand scheme of things, when that's split up...
Between millions
of people, that's not enough. One of the main suggestions, and then I'll get into the importance of reparations in a second, but one of the main ways in which we can procure reparations for the black community, a healing process, is that we can set up a council or a council in Congress made up of our black leaders when we can get some. I said that on the slide. I am so sorry to America and the world. I have my particular opinions. But when we can get some, we should make a council in Congress. We have the Black Caucus. A reparation committee. A reparations committee to sit down and to assess the mental and social and economic damages that has occurred within the black community, starting from 150 years ago, when the Emancipation Proclamation was first sent out by Lincoln, leading up until today. Because think about it, we're still trying to push through a glass ceiling. Why are we talking about police brutality in 2019?
Right.
Why are we having arguments?
Talking about criminal justice reform in 2019.
Right.
Why are we talking about economic and financial inequalities in 2019? Why, but see, that's why the conversation alone just makes me tired.
It does. It gives a
because
fatigue.
It does. It gives a fatigue because at the end of the day, it's like, how can you repair this? I mean, I guess reparations is a start, but it's a very small start.
It is a very small
Why
start.
do we still have glass ceilings? Why is it that what are the numbers? Why is it that the median white family has 41 times more wealth than a median black family?
Yeah.
41 times.
It's probably the same reason why the women's soccer team
How are you going to repair that? You know what I'm saying? Like, so these presidents are, these candidates are coming in talking about, what they plan to do, but it's like, okay, it's not enough.
Yeah, it's not enough. It's not enough for 400 years. What we've done...
I need all of it to happen at once. I need criminal justice reform. I need reparations. I need, economic equality.
Yeah.
I need, equity. I need money, whatever,
It's just, it goes back to the old quote that I believe it was Du Bois or Washington who said this: you can't really survive in a system that was made for you. So even though we go back
was not made for you,
right? Was not made for you. So even though we go back to 1964 with the signing of the civil rights legislation, we have to realize that we're in America, we're dealing with old colonial institutions that were not designed for people of color and were not designed for women. In order for us to see like full or at least a complete or at least a jump towards a completion of justice, we have to readdress those old institutions. But the country seems to be afraid of that because in order to do that, we have to admit that there's something internally wrong.
There's something internally wrong with this country.
And right,
There's
and
a
that
poison,
puts
yeah.
us right, and that puts us in par. I'm going to use Cold War phrasing here. That puts us in par with third and second world countries, and we want to see ourselves as the shining beam of justice. But this isn't a utopia. We have issues that are unaddressed. What you're asking is the same reason why. Remember, congratulations to the women's soccer team, the U.S. women's soccer team. You rock. But remember when they came back home from France, and now they're pushing for equal pay. It turns out that the men, I forgot the numbers, but they make substantially more than the women's soccer team, and they have lost. They haven't even qualified for the last three World Games, for World Cups. But the women have and have won consecutively. So why is it that the men are paid more than the men? The men are paid more than the women.
I mean, it happens every day.
It happens every day.
I can't tell you how many times and we're not supposed to talk about what we earn, in the day
Right.
jobs or whatever. But
Right.
luckily, I have some good people in my life, and there'd be guys that I know from work, and they'll tell me, hey, this is what you need to ask for. This is how much you need to negotiate. This is how much this position is being paid,
And
because you still have
gender wage gap, a gender wage gap, and that's discriminatory.
Yeah.
So I'm going to get into examples of reparations. You know what, Tiffany? I want to present both sides of the arguments because you do have people saying that reparations. I mean, even Bernie Sanders, God bless his soul. That's what old Southern people say when they want to say something else. God bless his soul. Before he came out saying that I want to do social and judicial reform and that can assist the black community. Now he's pushing into signing the recent legislation that's calling for reparations.
He said he wanted to do more research.
He wanted to do more research, and he said that some of his social policies would be enough. But this is what the other side is. I'll get into examples, and then I want to present the other side, and then I want to talk about this so that people can fully understand what reparations are.
What it looks like and what it's supposed to mean to us.
So if you guys remember, March of this year, we had a big surprise from the Australian government in Sydney, Australia. The High Court handed down the biggest native title ruling affecting Aboriginal ownership of the land in decades. That amid claims that billions of dollars in compensation will be needed to be given by the Australian government, to be given to the indigenous populations, the Ngaliruru and the Nangali. So forgive me if my pronunciation is wrong, the Ngaliruru and the Nangali Aboriginal tribes in Australia. What native title refers to is the rights of the Australian indigenous population to their traditional land and waterways as recognized by Australian common law and by international law. So this comes in response to the Mabo decision in 1993, basically overturning the British claim that Australia was a terra nullius,
What does that mean?
That means it's no one's land. So basically, it was colonized by the Brits, and basically it was given that this land belongs to no one except for the powerful government who had claimed it and established common law and thus civilization. In 93, they ruled against it with the Mabo decision saying, no, there are some parts of land that still belong, that have survived colonization, meaning that are, when they say the outback, that are outside of places like Sydney, that have survived colonization, meaning survived English establishment and history, that still belong to the indigenous people. And ever since then, you have heroes, I want to pronounce his name, like Tony Denholder, who have been pushing forward the cause for, first of all, indigenous recognition and title rights to land and waterways. Now I want to come back on this side of the country.
Right.
And in 1980s, we have a very powerful ruling made by the Reagan administration, the Civil Liberties Act, made in 1988, compensating more than 100,000 people of Japanese descent who were incarcerated in internment camps
In World War
during
II.
World War II. So this is what happened under Executive Order 9066. The administration had put Japanese Americans questioning their loyalty. Doesn't matter how many generations you have been in the U.S., you have been living in California at the time. They were questioning your loyalty to the Japanese government during World War II. So, in order to keep an eye out for you, they created in camps for families. They had to liquidate their assets, give up and liquidate their businesses and assets, give up personal belongings. They had to move their families into these camps, and this wasn't a 1, 2, 3 process. This certainly wasn't. These camps certainly were not the death camps that we had seen in Nazi Germany, but they were not, and they were in horrible condition. Your rights as a citizen have been restricted or taken away completely, and all of your belongings have been gone. After World War II, you were released and expected to go back into society. Boy, does that sound familiar. Does that sound familiar? You were released, freed, and expected to go back into society.
Back into a society that
Basically,
stripped you of everything that you knew.
Stripped you of everything that you knew, liquidated your assets, and put you in camps
And
just
so we
because of
paid
your ethnicity.
the America paid these people?
Yeah, in 1980, Congress responded by establishing a commission to investigate the legacy of the camps. Let me repeat that for everyone who needs to hear it, all the way to the Capitol building. Congress in 1980, I look back so I can get the right year, put together a commission to investigate the legacy of these camps, meaning there had been children, grandchildren, and somewhat great-grandchildren of those who were put into these camps. They went and spoke with the survivors and went and spoke with their families to see what type of mental and socioeconomic damage that had happened over the years since 1947.
Yeah.
And after interviews and personal testimonies, the commission issued its final report, calling the incarceration a grave injustice motivated by racial prejudice, war hysteria, and the failure of political leadership. Individuals in Congress at that time who were of Japanese descent, like Robert Matsui and Norm Mineta, helped turn the report into legislative language, providing for tax-free compensation and a formal apology.
So
I didn't mean to be dramatic. I just
I appreciate the dramatic.
Thank you. It just resonated in my soul.
It did, because that was in 1980. When was World War II?
So from 45. So December 7th, 1941 was when we entered the war.
Okay,
So it was around
about 40 years.
40
years or so or less.
40 years or so or less after the war had ended, and 45. 47 is when we made the state of Israel.
When did slavery end?
Today, 150 years ago.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's why Black people have voter fatigue.
Yeah.
Because it has been how many? 175 years? How many?
150 years.
150 years.
Yeah. This
Since
June 19th.
Slavery ended, and we are still being told to get over it. We still have policies in place that are detrimental to Black communities.
Yeah. We
still have excessive policing.
Yeah.
We still have economic disparity.
Yeah. So from 39 to 41, we didn't want to enter into the war at first because, World War I was just horrific for us. So, but when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, we had been fighting since 45, and we were still in talks. In 47, these people were not released until 1947. I want people to pay attention. 1980 is when they started having talks with descendants of those who were, you might as well say incarcerated, but no one came to talk to our community. They signed a bill in 1964, and that was it. There was no formal apology,
and there was
or anything.
Prior to Juneteenth this year, there was no discussion, no real discussion, and this is what pisses me off.
Yeah.
How convenient would you wait until Juneteenth?
Yeah.
to have a committee,
Yeah.
or, to go to Congress to talk about reparations.
Yeah.
This is a subject that hasn't been spoken about or brought up in 10 years.
Yeah. Basically.
10 years.
Basically. And it's a shame.
And it's like, now you have all of these candidates going around trying to rally for votes.
Yeah.
But it's like, what have you been doing? Like, where are we getting this money? This is 150 years
And
post-slavery.
Post-slavery. And this is what a lot of conservatives are saying. Number one, okay, that's great for the Australian government and that's great for Japanese Americans in the 80s. But where would this money come from in 2019?
Exactly.
Are you going to raise our taxes? Or, I mean, some of us...
People have it.
Right.
You have somebody that has $180 billion.
Yeah.
You have people that make billions of dollars on a daily basis.
Yeah.
The money is here.
The money is here. People like to play the game that America isn't as wealthy, as powerful as it was, but we still are.
We still pay for things that we don't need.
Yeah.
This country bleeds money into, weapon systems that we don't need.
Could it be argued that we take out of welfare, we pull out of welfare, and that could be money that we put into reparations?
No.
Or some of the social...
People need that money. People who are on welfare need that money.
So,
they're on welfare because they can't afford to live in this crazy country, with all of this inflation.
So that's what a lot of people... And I've been speaking to a lot of black conservatives.
Mm-hmm. And what are they saying?
So it's split. A lot of black conservatives are saying, yeah, reparations, apologies. Let's look into how we can actually do this effectively. They won't go into the finance, but they say effectively. Others are saying, well, it presents us to be weak. Like like we're the only people in this country that
in the world
that's looking for the government to put in our hands something that happened before we were born.
Black people. It makes black people look weak.
Yeah, that's what a lot of black conservatives are saying, that it makes black people look weak. The same thing when it comes to affirmative action. It makes us look weak because we're expecting the world...
A handout.
We're expecting a handout.
How disrespectful and hypocritical. Hypocritical.
Yeah.
You had no problem giving money to the Japanese.
No, and we are not against our Japanese American brothers and sisters.
This is not about
This
them.
is not an attack.
This is not about...
This is
about justice.
Yes, but you know what? I really fault us, and this is why I'm going to say this. So let's go back to Sydney, Australia.
Let me move over a little bit. I might have to look at him sideways. Hold on. What are you about to say?
Oh my gosh, you're right.
What are you about to say, Kevin Lassiter?
No. So let's go back to Sydney, Australia. This was done by a coalition of Indigenous Americans. Oh, Lord Jesus, have mercy. Indigenous Americans. Indigenous Australians.
It's okay.
It's okay. Indigenous Australians. So this started with the Mabo case in 93. Again, overturning British rule, saying that this land belonged to no one. It was a coalition. They literally marched themselves, similar to what the Khoisan are doing in South Africa, or have done in South Africa for Khoisan recognition. They marched themselves to Sydney, Australia, to the high courts, and demanded since 93. And so it was a slow process, but at first they started out with some lands, and now this is the largest allotment of land, the largest title land reform in Australian history. We should have been on top of our game, and they did this themselves. They didn't look to the government. They looked within themselves and they marched to the government, because under Australian common law, similar to the United States, the government is there for... Don't look at me like that. The government is there to establish an atmosphere of equality, but it's not built to give equality. It's something that you have to take. So I know I didn't say that correctly, but I'm paraphrasing.
Go for it.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's our preamble. Australian common law, built under British common law, is something similar, where they create an environment for the pursuit and not exactly giving you what you desire. So the Aboriginals marched from 93, and it went from the outback, and now it's the largest that they've seen. In 1964, I wish I had a time machine. In 1964, our people should not have settled for a signing of a bill stating that we can sit and we can go and we can eat and we can do certain things. We were promised. Do you remember Reconstruction? Do you remember? Well, of course we don't remember because we weren't born. But
explain it to Because a lot of people don't know what that is. 40 acres and a mule.
40 acres and a mule. 40
Yeah.
acres and a mule was sort of like a theme during Reconstruction that the government had promised African Americans or people of African descent in the American South who were first being freed, basically said, we will give you an allotment of land and we would give you particular resources so that you can farm your own property. That's a way for the rural center, the rural black center, to build itself. And honestly, they had seen a clash between Northerners and people coming in from the South because they had their own unions in the North. And here we are, a new population coming in, taking the jobs. Doesn't that sound familiar? So the government pushed this idea of 40 acres and a mule, saying, for those of you remaining, these are your resources that you have in order to create and forge your own future. Well, needless to say, that didn't work out so well because then you had the system of sharecropping where the people didn't own their own land. The land was owned and they rented. And it was a forever system where they had to pay the people, but the people would raise the rent so high that you spent a lifetime paying off what you own, and sometimes that even went into your own resources.
So why? Okay, so going back to your original comment, why do you blame us for that?
So
it's not like as if we had power,
right? So when I say us, I mean. So in 1964, we were owed 40 acres and a mule, not literally 40 acres and a mule, but we were owed resources.
We were owed resources.
We were owed
land,
resources.
yeah.
We should not have stopped when we lost King and when we lost X. We should not have stopped at the signing of the 64 bill. We should have said, this is great, this is nice, but what about the procurement of resources? Because then you saw redistricting, which meant that a lot of us was forced into urban centers where, and then you heard of white flight.
Right.
A lot of people left and went into the counties. A lot of us was forced into urban centers where we experienced food drought, economic drought, academic drought. We should have demanded, okay. The hoods. We should have demanded, okay, well, now I can go to the movie theater and not have to sit on the colored people's side. That's nice. But now, what about resources for academics?
Yeah.
And what about resources for job opportunity? What can we do about that? Obviously, we can't push for allotment of lands because of the nature of Australia and the nature of the United States are very different. But we can certainly push for resources for our community. What can make us what we should have studied is, okay, the Irish Americans, when they went through the Civil War in Ireland, and then when they went through their own troubles. Granted, they did have help from white politicians who finally recognized them and Southern Europeans as white. But what did they do within their community to construct points that they needed to address that can make their community strong? What did they do when they presented their okay, we'll give you our votes if you look into Boston, and this is what we need for Boston. If you look into certain areas in Philadelphia, and this is what we need. What did they do? What did our Jewish American brothers and sisters do before and after World War II to make sure that Jewish people across the seas and in the United States were good with resources? We should have sat down and said, what do we need to do besides this bill to make sure that we're good? Because we can have this bill, but that does not necessarily, that grants us access, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have a seat at the table.
But I feel like the world sympathizes with everyone else except for us. We're our allies.
Yeah.
You are saying something that was not feasible.
Yeah.
Because we were still being shot and killed and hunted like animals.
Yeah.
So at what point? Because I want to go back to your original comment.
Yeah, of course.
At what? Because you say we blame. Now I do agree that
but you get what I'm saying, right? When they like,
there's a certain I get it, and I feel like we could have done more research. We could have just stayed on it, and however. How is that possible when we don't have allies, when we don't have power?
Yeah.
When our voice is not being heard, when like I said, the world sympathizes with everyone but us. We are viewed across the world as less than. And so that's where I'm saying, where the voter fatigue comes in, it's like, okay, well, you're talking about reparations and you're talking about doing all this and that, for black people, but at the end of the day, who's really backing this?
Right. Is
it going to happen?
Right.
Or are you just talking to talk to get our vote again?
And see, this is what a lot of people, I like playing both sides.
Yeah.
But see, this is what a lot of conservatives are bringing to the table, both white and people of color. They're saying that the Democrats who are pushing for reparations are only pushing to procure the vote. They're pushing us to play the victim card, or they're pushing us into the victim stance to procure our vote. But then once one gets in office, are they really going to bring it to fruition?
Are they going to bring it to fruition, or are they just going to sign another bill?
Right.
That's going to say, well, we just like who was talking about it? Andrew Yang.
Yeah.
I like I like some of the things that some of the policies that he's talking about putting in place, but he was talking about creating he wasn't speaking specifically about reparations.
Right.
He was just speaking about economic equality.
Right.
Amongst all Americans, and he
Right.
he said that he would sign a bill that guaranteed $1,000 for every person after they turn 18 years old.
You and I were listening to that.
And so while that sounds good, $1,000 is not enough.
No, not for a single mother struggling with multiple children.
That doesn't even cover daycare.
It doesn't.
That does not cover daycare.
So Cory Booker has stating that he wants to run a policy that would help close the racial wealth gap, introducing a companion Senate bill to H.R. 40, calling for the federal government to study reparations. Meanwhile,
study reparations. Haven't we been studying this shit long enough? I mean, seriously though, like, what don't we know?
Right.
We have all the facts.
See, this is what I'm talking about. And I know a lot of our viewers are going to hate me for saying this, but so I come from Catonsville, but Baltimore City is right next door, so I always say Baltimore. I come from Baltimore. North Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue.
Do you?
My little Baltimore accent. You
do
ocean.
You now? Okay, Gary, I'm sorry. Carry on.
So Pennsylvania Avenue and North Avenue were, forgive me for the lack of phrase, for happening places. In fact, during the time of the Harlem Renaissance, we had our own Renaissance for the Black academic elite. And when the elite left with white flight, because some of us left the community,
right?
The interest in our own people left. Now, what am I saying? I mean, when we had our academic elites, when we had the interest, we carried a certain pride amongst our own people where we didn't depend on the government. We had our own businesses, we had our own shops, we had our own designers, we had our own way, our own government.
And what happened? No, I'm listening. Yeah. I'm listening.
And once the interest left, and two things happened. So once the interest left, the interest of the people in our own selves left, but also we were redistricted, and those lines were made to be in the city, and that's when you started to see, when the money left, that's when you started to see leaving of resources, academic resources, economic resources. I blame both government and us. Government because they redistrict us, and they made us into a particular ghetto. And yes, I'm using that term. That term is created during World War II. The ghetto were where people who were put into camps by the Nazis, they were forced into these areas, and impoverished areas, because it was secluding them from the rest of society. So when we were redistricted, we were put into these economic ghettos where we were separated from society, we were restricted. But at the same time, I mean, North Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenue, and for older Baltimoreans, you know what I'm talking about, we carried ourselves. Regardless of what outside government did, it was like Black Wall Street, which, they burnt down, which the government burnt down.
Exactly.
But Black Wall Street, for those of you who do not know, Black Wall Street was an area in Oklahoma, right? Where you had businesses just like Pennsylvania Avenue and North Avenue in Baltimore lined up, where people owned their own property, their own money, no outside government influence. They carried themselves. Government got jealous and burned it down, just like government got jealous and redistricted us. But it's evident that we can carry ourselves. We can hold ourselves.
And so are you saying that that's why we don't need reparations?
No, I'm saying that we need to form our own committees. We don't need to depend
on the government.
We need to infiltrate the government and form our own committee in Congress to decide what reparations are, and what that would look like for the black community. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to be mean. I don't mean to be exclusive for all Americans, for all singing in peace, for all singing in love.
Kumbaya and whatnot.
Yeah, no matter what color you are, we're all love. But
Yeah,
this is a
it's
black
true.
issue.
It is a black issue.
And we need black leaders and we need black people in Congress to form their own
To stand
committee,
up,
to stand
unite,
up,
and-
unite, and talk about this issue. That's what I'm saying. Booker and Sanders is kind of flippy floppy. I don't like him.
Not really.
If you become president,
He's your guy.
he should. I need my job. Listen, but but Booker, Harris, Yang presents their good ideas.
I
But-
feel like all of these candidates are presenting their good ideas. Even I love Marianne Williamson
Yeah.
because she, for
200
me,
billion to 500 billion.
the reason why I don't know if I love her as a presidential candidate because she does present a lot of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
She did put some numbers out there. She is an avid
Mm-hmm.
advocate of reparations and making things right within the black communities. However, I personally love her because I followed her before she ran for Congress. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and for presidency, as a spiritual leader,
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
spiritual guide and author.
Yeah.
But what I like about her is that she speaks to where this country is failing. It's not at the surface level of just throwing out money, and
Spiritual level.
it's a deep spiritual level that people really need to deal with.
Yeah.
There is a spiritual deterioration, it's just rot
Yeah.
within the center of this country.
What I like about South Africa in 1993, shout out to all the millennials who are 30 today, because we were 3 years old when this happened. What I like about South Africa, which I wish they would go back to, is that they actually at the end of apartheid, when Mandela was brought in, well, he was freed in the late 80s, but brought in as president in the 90s, early 90s, when we were 2 and 3 years old. They held a council to address particular grievances held against the indigenous populations of South Africa by the South African police. So they went and talked about colonialization by the Brits and by the Boers, which were the descendants of the Dutch that came and settled there. They talked about slavery, the procurement of resources. They talked about redistricting. We would call it redistricting, but restructuring the ghettos of South Africa, like in the cities of Johannesburg.
To exclude.
Right, where certain communities were pushed back and other communities were put at the forefront of resources. And so you stay over there, I stay over here. People say they do it subconsciously. I do think that there's internal racism when you talk about revoting lines, redlining and redistricting. But anyway, back to South Africa, when they redistrict and put people in certain places and categories, they address these in the International Criminal Court, or the ICC. And what it caused the nation to do is review what happened and begin a healing process, because all of those stories, it's like picking the Band-Aid
Picking a
off.
scab. Well, yeah,
picking a scab or picking the
But
Band-Aid
see,
off.
and that's the thing. Like,
We
I
didn't
feel
do
like
that.
these conversations about reparations are just a Band-Aid.
It's a Band-Aid for
It's just
what
a band.
we
It's
need
like
to
how
talk
can
about.
how can you heal a nation that is so corrupt and emotionally bankrupt
Right.
and spiritually bankrupt? Like, there is no, for me personally, that's where my fatigue comes in.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how can you fix a person's soul?
Yeah.
When you have the 1% or 2%, they make all of the money in this country, yet you have people that are starving here.
Yeah, Maryland is one of the
In the wealthiest
nation
in the world,
Yeah.
quote unquote, we still have people starving.
To give you
We still have people who are not being paid a decent wage.
yeah, Yeah.
And black people are at the very bottom of that,
the very bottom. Yeah,
economic inequality. So it's like, well, how are you going? Like, it sounds good,
yeah.
but I'm tired of hearing about reparations.
It's
How do you because it's the head.
Yeah.
And it has to trickle down.
Yeah,
So how do you cut off the head of the snake?
yeah. This is and you're gonna hate me, and a lot of people out there.
Nobody's gonna hate you because
Okay.
Kevin is wonderful.
I love you, and I love you all, the world and America. But this is what I'm talking about when we take matters into our own hands with a commission in Congress, because this is a Band-Aid. What we need to do is address the bitter issues concerning the legacy of slavery
They say
and
that this is a
racism.
stain on America. They say this is a stain on, no, it's a stain on the world.
Yeah.
You know.
What you do domestically is a reflection of what you do internationally. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, yeah. But yeah, that's why I like listening to Marianne, because she does speak to the spirit and heart of what really needs to happen. You have people that want to, have committees and study reparations, and I guess you want to just study how you can go about creating this amount of money, or whatever
Right.
reparations entails in order
Right.
to give back to the black people who are affected by slavery. But there's too much.
There's too much. And
There's
it's
too
more,
much.
It's more than just
there's
money.
it's more than just money. There's too much that needs to be done in order to repair our communities. And we can say as much as we want that, yeah, we know black people as a whole, we need to come together and do X, Y, and Z, but we are still being torn down.
How do you fight the glass ceiling even with the hammer if you're constantly being
Pushed down. Exactly.
That's the issue that we're here. That's why we need a black committee and Congress.
So
to
what's the
address this
solution?
issue. This is Kevin's solution.
What's the solution? No, not for this. Well, for that too. But
Yeah.
what's the solution for fatigue, the black voter fatigue?
Oh.
Because it sounds good. Like, you should vote. Why? Why should we vote?
Right.
Why should we care? Why should we form this committee? Because to be honest, do you think that we're gonna see this in our lifetime? Do you think that we are going to see real change within our lifetime as millennials?
I expect to stay on the sunny side and be optimistic, so I'm going to push for yes.
Yes. Okay.
So
okay.
what I do is I call up, as weird as it's going to sound, I call upon the spirit of the ancestors. And I remember what they struggled and what they went through. They did not have the voice or the platform that a lot of us have today.
You're right.
And so I get over my fatigue by thinking that, okay, Lassiter, you have the next generation to look.
To think about. Yeah. So it's the bigger picture. It's
the
not
bigger
about
picture.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to
No,
interrupt
no,
you.
no.
It was good.
It's
It was
the
good.
bigger
I
picture.
wanted to join in there.
Yeah. So I think of the next generation. They worked hard to get me to this point. Now I have to work hard to get
The next
generation to the next point.
Yeah. So basically, the motive.
Yeah.
Of
the motive zone.
The motive for beating, or trying to defeat voter fatigue or black voter fatigue or black political fatigue is not to. I know that it's sometimes the thought is above us.
Yeah.
Of looking.
It has to be.
Look. Yeah. The thought is above us. Concerning ourselves with issues today that are going to benefit the our future generations.
Yes.
It's hard to think that way and feel that way when you're in the midst of the mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like you said, our ancestors were in the midst of the mess. We had we have slave ancestors. So
it was hard looking at. I saw a recent ancestor, and I could calculate the year, and it wasn't that far.
Yeah.
That said that he did not know his birthday.
The reality is voting for these things and voting for a presidential candidate that may, in fact, put some kind of bill in place to start reparations. Get reparations started. We may or may not see anything happen in our lifetime. That's the reality of it.
Yeah. I mean, I still like to stay optimistic, but I would rather.
We might get that $1,000 a month, though.
Vote Yang. Listen, vote Yang. But I would rather see a committee form in Congress to address the issues of Black America, including reparations, the legacy of slavery, before we actually look into reparations. Because, like you said, it's just a Band-Aid over the symptom. It's a deeper root that we need to address concerning procurement of resources, including academic and economic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before we go, thank you for tuning in and listening to our spiel on black voter fatigue. But I just wanted to kind of bring a few things to your attention.
Yes.
We are now streaming on Apple Podcasts. Yay! We are also going to be streaming on Stitcher Radio.
Yes.
And Spotify is soon coming. We are on YouTube, so make sure you follow us at The Motive Zone on all of those applications. But also, we are going to be podcasting live from the African American, the AFRIM Festival. What does AFRIM stand for? African American.
African American.
Afro Festival out in
African
Baltimore.
American Cultural Festival in Baltimore.
On August 10th and 11th, we
Yes.
are going to be partnering with National CASA to bring awareness to children in the foster care system who, because in this area, particularly in DC and Baltimore, we have a huge, I want to say 80% of the children in foster care are Black children. So we want to kind of bring awareness to that, and also bring awareness to the cultural, some of the cultural happenings at the Baltimore Festival.
Yes, from the music to the food.
From the music to the food, we got, who's going to be there? I think Rick Ross is going to be there if y'all
Yes.
like, Rick Ross and whatnot. 7th Streeter. Or 7th Street, what? 7. I don't know. 7th Streeter.
Yeah.
7th Street.
Yeah.
Whatever. The singer.
7th Street.
She's gonna be there. A few other artists are gonna be there. So, if you would like to support, come visit us, and you have some questions for us, please. We're gonna be out there August 10th and 11th. We're gonna be talking about it every week until then. So stay tuned. Make sure you stay tuned and tune in next Wednesday at 6
p.m.
o'clock.
Yes.
6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye.